when we first met, which was at an event that for me, people talk about Nebworth being like Woodstock of the 60s, but the event for me that was like the storming of the Winter Palace for the Russian Revolution when the hooligans took over the asylum, the Trainspotting launch party in Cannes Film Festival,
yes.
1996.
Yeah, that felt quite a big moment. I mean, I remember sitting there, standing there kind of full of drugs in left field playing so loud at that party, and you know the fillings literally shaking out my teeth, and I'm thinking to myself, something's happening here. Like,
Came over and introduced myself, and I was fucking battered as well. There were some really strong pills going around that night. You were fucking battered. And I remember I said, I'm Martin Deeson from Loaded. You went, you threw me into a headlock, grabbed me, marched me off. I remember you saying, I think I've started a bit early. And you marched me off, took me outside on this terrace. I mean, it was like a fucking white palace where the party was. Up some stairs, and you go, Noel Gallagher. This is Martin Deeson. Welcome to Unloaded with me, Martin Deeson, the podcast where we talk to people who had a very interesting 1990s and are continuing to have an interesting time, how the non-stop party generation are coping with being the non-stop getting up in the night for a pee generation. It's Irvine Welsh.
hello, Marty.
Hello, Irvine. Mr. 1990s in a good way. No,
That's not a good way.
Well, there is a good way. I mean, what do I mean?
It's all good.
Not that you embody the 1990s, but that was the decade when it all took off, and you kind of dominated that decade.
Well, I mean, I think that,
Yeah.
Man, Noel Gallagher might have something to say about that.
Noel who? Yeah. Well, actually, I was going to say, do you remember when we first met, which was at an event that for me, people talk about Nebworth being like Woodstock of the 60s, but the event for me that was like the storming of the Winter Palace for the Russian Revolution when the hooligans took over the asylum, the Trainspotting launch party in Cannes Film Festival,
yes.
1996.
Yeah, that felt quite a big moment. I mean, I remember sitting there, standing there kind of full of drugs in left field playing so loud at that party,
right.
and the fillings literally shaking out my teeth, and I'm thinking to myself, something's happening here. Like,
That must have been because it was your party, right? I mean, you'd been obviously a successful author.
It's like, it's one of these things that you think to yourself, well, I've written this book, and I expected, I thought it would get some kind of traction because it was a bit different from everything else, but I didn't expect I would be kind of battling off supermodels at a premiere in Cannes, and just kind of and watching one of the top bands playing, there and everything, and sort of and kind of on a mad tear with all these different weird and wonderful people, and so it was quite a strange. I'd been sort of swerving it for as much as I could, and then it was just like I thought, well, you can't fanny around here. Just dive in with both feet and see if you come out the other side, basically.
Which you totally did, because the bit that I remember, I think we'd spoken before on the phone, I think, because perhaps you had done something for Loaded and we'd never actually met. So I came over and introduced myself, and I was fucking battered as well. There were some really strong pills going around that night. You were fucking battered. And I remember I said, I'm Martin Deeson from Loaded. You went, and you threw me into a headlock, grabbed me, marched me off. I remember you saying, I think I've started a bit early. And you marched me off, took me outside on this terrace. I mean, it was like a fucking white palace where the party was. Up some stairs, and you go, Noel Gallagher. This is Martin Deeson, the best writer working in Britain today, which of course is fucking absurd, but you take it where you...
I meant it at the time.
You take it where you can. And you went, Martin Deeson, this is Noel Gallagher, the best guitarist in Britain today.
No, again, that was a bit of a...
No one's going to hold you to either of those. And I remember Noel just looked down at me, and the look that Liam must have seen many times, just like
he specializes in that look, like
the eyebrows. Yeah. So I thought it was I don't know, like I say, the hooligans taking over the asylum. It was suddenly,
it felt great, it was like a sort of a mad sort of kind of you just you felt that it did feel like a revolution. You thought, fuck, I've arrived, and suddenly I've all these cohorts that shouldn't be in this position either as well. They're all in there as well, you know. So it was a strange time.
I was going, yeah, how was that for you? Because, I was, so, okay, so both of us are completely fucked. Both of us in different ways make our living from writing at the time. I'm a journalist, you're obviously a novelist, which usually you kind of think the people who do that are kind of most comfortable communicating with the world through a keyboard. Not really used to, for my case, not used to being at huge parties in the south of France. So I throw myself in, but B, I'm a bit nervous. So both of them contribute to me getting absolutely fucking bladdered. But for you, you're literally the centre of attention. Was that weird for you? I mean, did it contribute to feeling the need to be high?
It was great. It was brilliant.
Brilliant.
I mean, I think that, and it's that thing, when you get, when you get attention, it's like if you do anything artistically, like kind of, like fiction or music or art, paintings, you want attention. That's why you do it, and you want to connect with other people. That's and then as it happens, it's like it becomes that double-edged sword. You think that you go all kind of, I want to be alone. You go into that sort of, it becomes that sort of, it just becomes that thing that can, that takes over, so it's that kind of careful what you wish for type of thing, but the great thing about being a writer and spending so much time with a book, you have to spend time on your own, and you have to enjoy spending time on your own. And I've always been fortunate that I've always loved going out and partying and kind of hanging out with different people and just having a bit of a tear and going off on a mad one. But I've also really loved being on my own. I've really loved the discipline of sitting down and doing something for long stretches on my own. I kind of cherish both those things, and the thing is that the one that is the engine of me that kind of is responsible for everything that I do is the knuckling down and being alone. So it always takes precedent. It's like, but then you just think to yourself, I've been doing this for so long, I'm becoming a boring bastard. It's like the missus will say to me, you've got some friends have come downstairs, come down and talk to your real friends instead of your imaginary friends in this room upstairs, And you spend time, to spend time with people that don't exist isn't perhaps the best thing, So you have to kind of pull yourself away, and you have to get into your own life, and you have to sort of see your own life. And I've got a variety of things that I do that help me do that pull me in from this funny world of me and the laptop and kind of floating around in my own head into the reality of things. Yeah.
Yeah, no, it's funny because I'm sure what I'm about to say to you, I bet you were joking at the time, but I'm sure you've got much better at it because that's a real tension, right? If you make your living writing, but you really enjoy partying, they're not especially, you've got to be quite organised to manage the two of them.
Yes.
Because you can't really write with a massive hangover. You definitely can't write while you're out and about doing stuff. So the other one I was going to say to you is I remember another time we met, which was a little bit later, probably the end of the 90s, I had this series of articles for GQ called GQ&A, where I get two people who were both brilliant to interview each other. So I had Howard Marks interviewing Sean Ryder and suggested to you that we did Bret Easton Ellis together in Dublin, which we won't need to break down the details of the day too much, but just
the most astonishing thing about that is, and it says a lot for him, that Bret and I are actually really good friends now. And
brilliant.
We've actually worked together on a graphic novel and a radio show. And whenever I'm in LA, I'll go out to dinner with Bret, and it was it wasn't the kind of the meeting that you would think a great friendship's going to grow out of this. The reverse, but I think it's like there was only one place to go after that.
Yeah.
Really,
Oh, I'm so pleased that I feel some sort of slight pleasure that I brought you two together because it was unlikely, and he was so sort of urbane, and you and I again were in kind of party mode. I mean, the bit that I was going to say is I remember I think you and I met in London.
It was too much
early morning flights, fucking loads of booze. Yeah. Arrived in Dublin airport about 10:30 in the morning. We'd done the Shakespeare Arms in Heathrow, drunk on the plane, going to Dublin airport. And I remember you fell up the escalator. Yeah. And I said to you, but a genuine question. I said, Irvine, because I wanted to write books myself. I said, Irvine, when do you get books written. When do you manage to write books? And you looked up and went, February. And I just thought that was the best fucking answer.
Yeah, well, it's true. You know, I'm still a February guy.
Because you're a sober spring man, aren't you, right?
Yeah, I mean, I tend to, after New Year, I stop everything, and I go to Miami. I've got my place there still, and got my boxing clubs right next to the apartment, and there's a yoga studio down the road.
Nice.
So I get into that, and I just write and exercise, and maybe a little bit of microdosing if I'm going to a club, you know. So, but other than that, you know.
I remember you said that when I asked you some questions for the Daily Telegraph, who were doing a feature about sobriety in the winter, because I wrote an article saying that a dry January is all pain and no gain.
Yes.
Dry January, February, March, you really get the benefits.
Well, that's
and
the
you said a
thing,
bit of
yeah.
microdosing acid. I can't get that right. That works for you, right?
Yes, it does. Yeah. But very, very small amounts, like, you know, a sort of an eighth of a tab.
Okay.
At the best, like, you know.
But for going out, because I know some
going
people.
out, it's just a really easy thing. I mean, I had a friend who was he had kind of struggled with depression, most of his life, and he was on all these antidepressants, these Ambiens, and all that sort of stuff. And he threw all that away and started microdosing, and then his life just, you know, was so much better, and he's so much happier, basically, you know. And he's kind of and there's a learned behavior to it, because he's actually stopped now. He kind of started. He did it every other day, and then he did it maybe once a week, and then he did it, you know, maybe once a week, Monday, and then at the weekend, Friday. And now he very rarely does it. You know, he's phased it out, and it seems to have reconfigured his whole kind of internal workings in some way.
Well, I mean, it literally does, doesn't it? Right?
Yeah.
I interviewed Professor David Nutt. You know, the guy who was the drug czar under the Tories, and they fired him for saying that he said ecstasy was safer than horse riding and fishing, which it is, statistically, right? And also a lot more fucking fun.
Yeah.
And they fired him. So he's now one of, he's that sort of Mr. Psychedelic Research. And I interviewed him again for the Daily Telegraph, bizarrely. And it's incredible. So, obviously they're using mushrooms particularly, but also ketamine and stuff for PTSD, depression, eating disorders, addiction, but also longevity. Now they're finding out that it does amazing stuff inside the brain. So Albert Hoffman, who discovered acid, lived to like 106.
Right.
It can be used for Alzheimer's, heart disease.
Yeah.
That's my fucking excuse.
Yeah, all these implications, all these things that, you know, we've got kind of big pharma kind of just knocking out all this shit that makes people comatose, and then they have to have pills for the side effects of this, and then for the side effects of those pills and all that. It's just absolute nonsense.
Just in my lifetime, the way people have, antidepressants were like the savior, weren't they? Prozac Nation, all that stuff.
Yeah.
And then now people I know who've been on them for 25, 30 years can't get off them.
Yeah.
Still depressed.
Yeah, still depressed.
And just paying big money to big pharma. It's really
it's crazy.
Yeah. No, it's things like that. It feels like it's a great time to be alive. We both had a great mutual friend, Howard Marks. I always say to people who don't know him, Mr. Nice. Used to control 20% of the world's marijuana supply, did 7 years in prison, sadly not with us anymore. But I remember I spent a lot of time with him as he was on his last legs in Leeds, and him saying, I can't believe, he said, that fucking America legalized marijuana first. They put him in a 3-sided cell with bars with a TV on like 18 hours a day, drove him fucking mad in Terre Haute prison. Because they're, of all people, which is it's a good thing,
it's
right?
Funny, a strange quirk. When I was living in America, I met the guy. What was his name? He was I forget his name. He was a really nice guy, but he was the American Howard Marks, basically.
All right, okay.
And he served time with Howard. And he hadn't realized, he hadn't known that Howard had died. And he was really upset.
Yeah.
Really, really upset, because he was very close with him, like in the prison time. Obviously, Howard couldn't go back to America after that, But I mean, he was such a bright man, such a wise soul, Howard,
And warm as well, and lovely.
Very,
and
very
very
warm,
sort of embodied the Celtic thing to me.
Yeah, he was like that, had that kind of sort of like Richard Burton joins the Rolling Stones type thing going on.
Looked like a Rolling Stone, sounded like Richard Burton.
Yeah.
Didn't you two, I remember at the time him telling me, you two had spent a summer in the 90s living together in the Manumission Hotel in Ibiza?
That was nuts. That was mental.
That was very quiet.
That was absolutely mental.
I'm trying to get a Claire Manumission. I don't know if you're still in touch with her.
Yes, I am. Yeah.
She's got a book coming out. I'm trying to try and get her on. I think it'd be great.
They would be great, Claire and Mike. You'd have to maybe have them in different parts of the couch, though.
Were you DJing out there at the time at the Manumission Hotel?
Yes, I did. I DJ'd it, and I remember it was like I was, it was like when the club was, it was like kind of almost 10,000 in the club. It was big
Like a
mental
huge
rave,
club, wasn't it? Yeah.
and I was playing this. I was playing on vinyl, and I could never even beat much on vinyl. It was always terrible, but I was just blown away. There's 10,000 people going absolutely nuts. And then I realized they're going to go nuts. Whoever's there, they're all on holiday. Like, they're having the time. They're just having it anyway. Like, And I was looking around and I said, well, they're stars of their own show. They're not watching me as DJ. And then I realized they're watching Mike and Claire's show
Right.
and you've got Federico, the guy who can suck his own cock.
The guy with
basically.
did ribs taken out?
Yes,
Did he could blow himself on stage?
Yes, yeah. And
Where is he now?
yeah, he's an accountant now. I ran into him, and he's like an accountant, and he's very, he's still in Ibiza. He's,
Wow.
yeah,
An accountant who can suck his own cock.
yeah.
That's a character, surely,
Yeah.
from one of your books.
He doesn't even
Surely.
need to be an accountant.
No, he doesn't need to be. That's what, so we had once, so having met you sort of there, I suppose, both sort of at the early 90s and then at the end of the 90s, one thing that struck my mind, so I was reading recently Miranda Sawyer's book, Uncommon People, which I think is really good about the 90s music scene.
Yep.
And she says this thing in there, funny, about Oasis. She says that she was one of those journalists who went to see Oasis perform at the Marquee. They did like a showcase for journalists in '94. And the people who were there always tell you they were there because it was so kind of, such a big moment. I wasn't there. I went to see them a couple of months later in Shepherd's Bush Empire. But she said what was amazing to see them there was that, usually you go and see a new band, even when they're really hyped, and they'll be kind of like, the lead singer might be brilliant, but the clothes aren't quite right, or the swagger isn't quite right, or the lyrics are good, but the songs aren't quite formed yet, or the drummer's not brilliant. And she said it was one of the only times she'd seen a band, they just walked on stage in that tiny venue, on that tiny stage, and they were there. They were like born fully formed. Oasis,
Yes.
they were already playing the first 4 or 5 hits. But I was thinking that about you, right? You seem to emerge fully formed.
Emerged fully formed,
Yes, you're born
I
like
mean,
this.
I think that's a very generous assessment, Martin. I don't know if I don't know if a lot of people would agree with that, but yeah, I mean, I think that the good thing was that because I've kind of fannied around with music for years and never really got anywhere, I sort of and I was used to kind of, I was used to turning all these tapes into record companies and getting told to, not even getting told to fuck off. Nobody actually
not
looking
getting-
at any,
right.
not even a reply, basically. Like
These are like punk bands this year.
Yeah,
right?
yeah. So I kind of served the rejection apprenticeship, and I kind of went into, because I wanted to do something in music and I never could. I didn't have any. I wasn't really that invested in writing. I didn't have any heroes that were writers, any literary heroes, for example. So I went in with no fear whatsoever, and I just kind of thought, I'm just going to write this in my own voice. If people like it, great. If they don't, So I had not so much a level of confidence, but a level that I wasn't really bothered about, if it didn't work out, basically. So I think I came in with that quite brazen sort of attitude to it all. And I think that, when you're a teenager, you're standing in front with your mother's hairbrush, kind of just kind of singing in front in the mirror and all that stuff. And basically I've been doing that for fucking 20 years, but by the time, so I was used to sort of, I'd almost like served the apprenticeship of stardom in a way, and and I'd been a kind of ligger around, sort of. I was always this guy that I knew people who sort of were well known, basically, even though I wasn't myself. And it was actually great to actually have something. Here I am. I'm a legitimate member of the club now, rather than this fucking weird hanger on, basically. So that was kind of edifying. But I always thought, well, when you know people that have been quite good and are quite brilliant in their own ways and quite successful, and you think to yourself, well, it's always that mystique of kind of talent and iconizing people goes. You know, you just think, well, they're just a fucking daft cunt like anybody else, and they apply themselves this way, they apply themselves that way. They might have some talent, but what they have is a lot of drive and application, and they're kind of into what they're doing and all that. You know, so I think that. That gave me a kind of validity in my own eyes, basically. You know, so and I realized that what I have to do is keep fucking working, keep writing. Don't let anything distract you from that, because you've finally found something that you can do. You know, so keep doing it, basically, and I have since then.
I think, but the two elements of what you say to make it, just makes it more remarkable to me, which is one that. I've never got the impression with you. It wasn't like, you know, you get these some people who are just like desperate to be famous, so they try different areas. You know, they usually end up as a TV presenter or something, but they try a bit of this, they try a bit of that, try being a comedian because they want to be famous. But I never got that impression with you, is that you wanted to be creative, I think.
Yeah, I mean, I wanted to experiment. So that thing that you know, there's always two things, I think, that you want to be, you want to express yourself in some way, and you want to connect with other people. And you express, for me, expressing myself was about trying to find creativity and trying to make something, trying, you know, whether it was a book or a record or a TV show or a film. You know, I've still got that mentality that I want to make something and show it to people, and hopefully they enjoy it. You know, if they don't, you just move on to the next thing and try that, basically. You know, and that's always been there's always been that urge, you know, to do something and to show people this as well. You know.
I think that's kind of what I mean when I say fully formed, because obviously I know you were like, I think you're about 6 years older than me. So when that 90s thing was happening, I'd be 28, you'd be like 34, 35 when Trainspotting came out. And what I mean by the fully formed is you rattled through about 5 different skill sets there that you need to make the Irvine who writes Trainspotting into the success that he is now, which is not giving a shit too much about failure or what people think of you, rather. Not being intimidated by literature, that you came out immediately writing. I mean, that was the most said thing about you at the time, that you were writing in this exactly as you spoke, and the people around you in Leith spoke, which was kind of pretty revolutionary, right? I mean, there aren't many writers who've done that. It was a package, you know?
I think the interesting thing is, it's, I remember when Oasis had that first hit single, the #1 single, whatever, I think it was the first #1 single.
Yeah.
And Jeff Barrett had a party, put on this party for them. And I remember that was when I sort of saw them for the first time, and it was almost like, you're talking about fully formed. They always thought that Noel was this fully formed pop star. You know, he's like, he's been a roadie for the Inspiral Carpets. He's been immersed in it. He was like, he was very kind of confident and relaxed, and he kind of, you know, but he was like 5 years older than Liam. He was just a young guy, basically. And you know, all you can do is, when you're in that age, you just have to double down on it, you know, and you have to just like kind of get through this any way that you can. So I think it was Noel had almost served his pop star apprenticeship, whereas Liam was just thrown in at the deep end as a young guy, getting all that kind of attention. And, you know, I was lucky because, as you say, I mean, I was like, I think when Trainspotting was published in 1993, I was like kind of 32, 33. And then when the film came out, you know, sort of, it was only 3 years later, but that was another little apprenticeship as well. You know, you learned to be a kind of successful writer, and then the play came out after that, and that made the book national, and then with the film it kind of went global, basically. You know?
Yeah, I mean, it would have been very easy to get knocked off centre by that, having such a huge success with your first novel, which was your first novel, right?
Yeah.
I mean, I know you published little bits of it, was in Rebel Ink before and stuff, but it was your first book. That's a bit like, you know, first out, you know, getting a hit album, they say, is one of the first, is a bit of, if that happens to you, that can knock you right off path.
Well, the good thing was that, you know, before the book had actually been published, I'd written The Acid House, a collection of stories, and I actually had that second book ready to go, and it came out 6 months after, which is a very short time in publishing. It never really happens, but they were keen to capitalize on Trainspotting, and they, you know, I sort of within the space of a year, I was a 2-book writer.
Yeah.
which gives you a lot of confidence. And both
Yeah.
books were quite acclaimed. One was just starting to really. I mean, Acid House actually sold more right, in the first year because of the title, I think.
Good
and
title.
then it just
yeah.
kind of just kept. But Trainspotting just went in this mad sort of this mad trajectory, and it gave me. I felt I was established very quickly. I kind of hit the ground running, and I didn't. I was able to come in at quite a high level,
Yeah.
basically.
And did just the way that worked financially? Were you able to? So you were, for people who don't know, but you were working in the council offices.
I'd come back up from Edinburgh, from London to Edinburgh. I've been living in London, and I went back up to Edinburgh, and I was working for the district council, and I had a good job. I had a couple of quick and rapid promotions, and I was doing pretty well there. And as soon as the book got to a certain level, I took a year's career break. Basically, I had the opportunity to do that, and I moved to Amsterdam, like kind of like renting the book, basically, kind of life imitating art. I went to Amsterdam, and I just never went back. Basically, I just I've been very, very lucky. I've just been able to write full time since then.
So you've been a full time writer since
then,
'96 or something like
and
that.
I've been able to build sort of kind of careers in like TV and film, but also and also being able to resurrect the music and to get on with that as well. So I've used it. I've not just used it to knock out a book every year or every 18 months. I've used it to kind of move into the other kind of creative areas that I've always been interested in.
I think it's what people may not always be aware of that, because I think they know your prolificness on the books. I mean, is it like 15, 16 books now?
Well, I think more.
More, is it?
More. Must be closing in on 20 now.
Those are 20, right? But and then the one that's out now, Men in Love, which I love that title, by the way. It's just a fucking great title. It's about taking the gang through the late 80s into the early 90s club scene, and also in love with E and all that sort of stuff, but also just actually trying to find the love of a good woman, that kind of thing, actually settled down.
Well, that struck me as it's an interesting time. I mean, because it's it's what we were talking about actually earlier, that when you're 25, in your mid-20s, you kind of you grow up as a kid, and you're sort of your parents are the big influences in your life, and then you kind of the hormones kick in, your mates or your wee mob or your big kind of governing influence. And then you get to a point in your mid-20s when you get a bit sick of them, and your missus, your girlfriend or whatever becomes the most important thing, And then you think, so when that happens, when that becomes overriding thing, you've got all these decisions to make. It's like, are we going to stay together? Are we going to live together? Are we going to get married? Are we going to have kids? How many kids are we going to have? Are we going to live close by when we've got support? Are we going to move away for the sake of careers? We're both going to have a career. Does one of us have to retrain and support the other, and all these fucking huge decisions when you're basically staggering at a club, fucking off your tits on pills, or you're staggering at the bar, pissed. You've suddenly got to make all these decisions. It's just absolute madness, and you think to yourself, this is quite incredible how people actually manage to keep relationships going. It's actually, the biggest mystery is how so many of them actually succeed rather than fail, So you have this, and I'm thinking like about the Men in Love book. Who do I know that's even more fucked up than I was at that time? So I think I'm going to bring these characters back and see how they get on with this.
That's funny you say it, because it brings it back. I remember being that age, and there was always a really funny transition, because you're still the young man at heart, so you meet girls, women in those situations, off your tits in a club, you fall in with someone because you like them, you're having sex, you both like getting off your tits. And there's always suddenly there's a Saturday afternoon when you're in the supermarket or in IKEA or something, buying furniture. How do we make these two worlds?
Yeah, you're on that mad dopamine smash together, and you think to yourself, it's usually the women, because they're more sensible than guys. They usually think how do we, once we've chiseled ourselves out of these kind of bed sheets that are welded together, with our fluids, how do we actually make something kind of workable out of this? How do we make a relationship out of this? And how do we have to stop eating takeaways and kebabs and all this kind of stuff, and we have to actually go to the supermarket and buy food and make things for us and all this, so it becomes that thing that, how do we do this? And it's usually quite a shock, and it's usually quite a shock to usually quite a shock to the system for guys, because they're thinking, can't we just carry on as we were? It was great.
It's like a role play, and that's what I've always felt like in that situation. Let's play at being grown-ups.
Yes.
And you have to, instead of just thinking what we're going to do Friday night, you've got to think of the next week and the next month. And suddenly you're like, am I playing role play, or am I just fucking become the role? You know?
You have to actually think. That's the thing. You have to kind of think and plan all these things that are anathema to you, particularly at the weekend when you just want to get off on one.
I can't remember if it's in the book or maybe it was an interview I read where I like what you said about, particularly in the bits of Edinburgh where you were from, where it was like a sort of sexual apartheid before but like, like a sort of Australian thing, there'd be men in one corner, women in the other, and they wouldn't really
different
meet.
bars,
and then
the lounge in
different
the
rooms.
bar,
and then pills came along, and suddenly
pills came along,
you'd be talking to each other.
And you found out that all these lassies that you knew that were kind of like her indoors types, like your mates' girlfriends or wives, they're suddenly much more interesting than your mates. You think, why have I been talking to those fucking useless cunts when I should be talking to them? And that's quite a revelation as well. So it was such an interesting time, such a great sort of discovery. Apart from it's like, and one of the. I mean, I kind of loved dancing. I was always, dancing my tits off, and even though these legs are past their best, I can, I'm still kind of, I'm still driven to the dance floor. But one of the great things about that time was just sitting in these chill out zones, talking to all these weird and wonderful people. Just such an education, such an eye opener.
That was always my favourite bit of the night.
Yeah.
The best bit was the coming down gradually in the chill out area. That's when you just find that connection with people that, you don't get anywhere else in the same way. And you just complete strangers opening up in ways that are just, sometimes you're like, oh, fucking shut up.
That's what they're saying to me, not only we liked it when you were a sullen Scot that never talked to everybody. Stop being
about your childhood.
Yeah, fuck's sake.
But I mean, that stuff, it brings together the obsessions that, I just would like to hear where the obsessions come from. I mean, that's three of your obsessions would seem to be really kind of obvious, which is men. And these are obsessions with things that you're not necessarily in love with. Men, you've just spoken very warmly about women, but men being fucking useless, men failing, drugs. But I really strongly get the impression that, you've loved drugs and still do love drugs, which is, we'll talk about the documentary in a minute, comes across clearly in that. But love drugs, hate addiction. I don't know if that's a fair way to describe it.
Yeah, I think so, yeah.
So it's almost like your fascination is, but yet you yourself have managed to, you famously were a heroin addict, but you managed to get out quite quickly. You're definitely not a failure. You are still a man. But, you're obsessed with the things that you're not, but you're quite close to. Is that sort of fair to say? Tangential, is that the word?
Yeah, I mean, I think that, that you have to, you have to kind of love life, and you have to love the silliness and stupidity of life, and that's the thing that, and I think when you write, you want to write something dramatic. You want things to happen on the page, and the chartered accountant. I mean, even the ones who can't suck their own cock, they're not that particularly.
But the ones who can't.
They're not that, they're not the chartered who comes home to his wife and kind of, is dutiful, and the money's in the bank all the time. That's not really interesting to read about. What's more interesting to read about when he comes in, his wife's shagging his best mate, and he picks up a bread knife and tries to, he decides, do I want to kill one or the other? Do I want to kill myself? And then he runs away, goes into the pub, smashes kind of, half a dozen nips, scores some cocaine, kind of meets a prostitute, her pimp comes in through the door, all these, so it's like, and what actually happens, it starts off with a catastrophe, and then it's like, that's compounded by bad decision making. We make all when something happens, something bad happens in our life, people just want to go and get fucked up, and that just makes it worse, basically, and it's like, so it's a bad decision, and that kind of sets a whole chain of events going. And that's always fascinated me. It's always fascinated about the ability of men in particular, women as well to an extent, but men in particular, ability to take a terrible situation and contrive to make it worse through bad
so
decision
true,
making.
isn't it?
I love it, and it's like I love writing about it, and I love and it's like and I've tried to make these things cautionary tales to myself, like like, don't fucking do this. You've done this. You don't need to do it again. You know where it goes. You know how it ends up.
But you seem to have a great self-awareness in that respect, because obviously I was spent the last couple of days just reading bits and pieces I could find about your life, and a fair amount I knew, but stuff I didn't know. For instance, both of us lost really close friends in car accidents in teenage years, which had a huge effect on me, because one night my mate was there, the next morning he wasn't. That taught me, fucking hell, this is a precarious thing. You can step off the curb and die.
Yes, it's that's
a big lesson, right?
This is a finite gig, basically, and it can be over at any time.
You lost. It was a car full of mates you lost,
yes.
right? On going over was it Firth or Forth Bridge?
It was, what happened was 4 of us out for a night out in the town. We were 16, and 2 of the guys, there's 2 of us went to the chip shop queue, and 2 of the guys nicked a van and to drive back to the scheme, and they drove around a couple of times peeping on us, but we were too greedy. Me and my mate John were too greedy. We stayed in the queue, and Raymond and Paul lost patience, and they just drove back, and they ended up had a head-on collision on the Forth Road Bridge. And that's the worst thing about it.
So it could have been you.
Really, in other circumstances it might have been, because we just we would have piled in but it was the thing about it is, it's like you didn't have any, I was an apprentice sort of TV mechanic then, and you didn't have any, there was no counselling or kind of post-traumatic stress, or like that. So we just wandered around like zombies for a couple of days, and, sort of, and we were too ashamed to say that we'd been nicking cars and all that, we nicked cars to get back. So we never told anybody, we never told our parents, and the parents of the deceased kids, particularly one of them that we were close to, were the only ones that we could really confide in, and it was like
you'd been there that evening,
and it was like a kind of, it was a sort of, it was such a strange thing, and I remember we basically just, we'd been underage drinkers, we've been going out in town and having a laugh, and and sort of, enjoying ourselves and getting, going to the football and getting involved in all sorts of nonsense. And we suddenly became these 2 guys who just sat in each other's bedrooms playing Subuto, which younger boys would do, basically, at that age.
You and your mate did?
Yeah.
And
that was our way, just sitting there, because outside became quite a grim, dark place for us at that time, And again, you come out of it and you get past it and all that, but it was such a strange time, it was like, it was kind of, it was very young to learn about loss in that way, and to not actually comprehend and what was happening. One of the guys in particular was a very, very bright, sort of smart guy, and I think would have gone on to do a lot of great things with his life.
No, I think so. I had so that happened to me, and then both of us lost our parents. My mum died when I was 21. Your dad died when you were 25. The other way of dying, a long, slow death.
Yeah,
right?
That's a lot to have learned. I was about 22.
You were 20. Oh, so the same then, right?
Yeah.
And I just remember thinking at the time, which whenever I've been bereaved, you walk around, the whole world's carrying on around you. You just think, none of you fuckers understand. I think that it can end suddenly. I think it puts a barrier between you and the world in some ways, and it can lead to really nihilistic behavior. I mean, you were doing smack quickly after that.
Yeah,
right?
I mean, it was the long up to, that was the thing, it was like, I went from the Subuto response to the smack response, basically, to bereavement, it's a kind of alternative coping with bereavement strategies. But it was like, there just seemed to be, there was no opportunity for kind of pain management, and there was no opportunity in any sort of way at all. And there was also, when something like that happens, there's so much that goes unsaid, and there's so much that, that to still try to comprehend that somebody's gone forever is still very young at that age, because your sense of mortality is not really kicked in. It doesn't really happen until your late 20s, really, that you think, that you kind of think to yourself gradually, fuck it, this is the state of us all, basically. But to have that happen so kind of so emphatically that they're not coming back. Basically,
Yeah.
like, you know, it's a it's it's just a strange thing, and it imbues a kind of, you know, that what you were talking about, that dislocated kind of sense that you're detached from the rest of the world, and you're detached from the rest of humanity, and I think it imbues that in you, basically.
Yeah, I think it's just learning that lesson too early, isn't it? Because I think, without getting too poncy, I think there are some psychologists who say that, you know, it's the fact that we have to recognize the fact that one day we don't exist anymore.
Yeah.
That, you know, maybe that's, do we make up, or whatever everyone's opinion is, we make up religion. That's why we have a lot of neuroses, all sorts of stuff. That's the biggest thing that humans have to cope with. And as you get older, it rears its head again, doesn't it? You're like, what? I might actually fucking, this whole shebang, which is obviously centered on me, might finish.
It's funny because I've been reading this. I read this book recently. It's Justin Curry from Delamitri, the Tremolo Diaries, and he had this this triple. You know, it's about, you know, people of that generation not being equipped to get old, basically, and not being equipped for all these kind of, you know, mortality issues. And he had a terrible, you know, it's like he had a terrible thing happen that all within the space of a few weeks. Like, you know, his mother died. Most emphatically, his missus, who's his partner for years and years, had this massive stroke and was kind of bedridden in this facility, you know, this care facility. And then he got diagnosed with Parkinson's. All, you know, in a very tight window. You know, there's three things, big things like that, and it's like he's just basically on this tour of America, which is kind of, you know, possibly going to be his last tour, and, you know, and it's all these ruminations on him trying to distract himself from this book, trying to come to terms with it at the same time. It's absolutely a wonderful book. It should be very depressing, but it's very uplifting in the way that he's trying to seek out all these kind of galleries and museums, and sometimes a tour bus plonks him in this kind of IKEA kind of hellhole miles away from anywhere, like, you know. But, you know, it is, I was just thinking, this is about a generation who really are very individualistic and narcissistic, and, you know, they've grown up with that post-war materialist entitlement, but have also grown up with that kind of that twisted narcissism that grew out of Thatcherism, as well, you know, and you know, and with kind of cocaine and with this kind of this self kind of elevation thing. You think, this is not a generation that's supposed to get old, basically. They're not really equipped for it. And I thought his book was great because it holds that mirror up to that whole generation, basically.
What's it called? It sounds really
interesting. It's called
The
Tremolo Diaries.
Tremolo Diaries, nice. Yes. I'll look out for that. I mean, that touches on so much. I think, you know, our generation, and the two things that make me, what you just said is, one, I think now, I mean, if you don't think of the difference between the 90s and now, which is huge, I think the difference between the 70s and the 90s, yeah, it's certainly a difference, of course. And the 80s were a bit of a hellhole as far as in my view, you know, that was the real class war, miners' strike, Brixton riots, print union, you know, people getting their heads fucking battered, poll tax riots on the streets of Britain by the state. City of London being whatever what the word is, you know, disorganized and allowed to do whatever they fucking want. And it's the fruits of that I feel that we're in now.
Yeah.
And what you're just saying, I think we seem to live in a society that is that now. It's become fractured, and you know, you've written before about, you know, you grew up in the punk scene in London. It was very tribal, and people actually went out and did stuff together, and they found their tribe. And now, I'm not saying very eloquently, but now people are just sitting on their fucking phone being served shite. And is that just an old man thing to say, or is that
well, both? I mean, it is an old fucker's kind of observation, but it's actually true as well. You know, you kind of, you know, that life has gone from the street to the screen. You know. And there's no content, you know, in the street, all that culture was loud and vulgar and contested and argued and debated. There was there was a kind of mad, cheerful, sort of haphazard democracy about it all, And now it's the Instagram influencer says this is go and this is out, and the pressure to conform is kind of so strong, And I keep looking for green shoots. I mean, I think that when I see all these young kids, young lasses going out to a Taylor Swift thing, I think, fucking good on you. You've been locked up, and now you're going out en masse. You're seeing this. The Brat Summer again, young women going out and seeing all their kind of local kind of stars and heroes, and the Oasis thing. I think I'm hoping that that's a catalyst for a new Roaring Twenties that get people off the phones and get people coming back out and having it and doing things, and so I mean, there's so much ugliness about these whole big prepackaged thing with all the merchandising and all the the sort of what they call it, dynamic pricing and all this horrible stuff. But there's something about watching 72,000 people singing in mass karaoke of all these songs that were their heritage songs, like not just people from our generation, but kids who just listened to it on their dad's car stereo or their mum singing it in karaoke. I think it was such a moving experience to be at these gigs.
That's to me, that's one of the plus sides. When I look for the plus sides, I think the two things I always think is one, I can imagine if you grow up and you're just completely isolated and misunderstood, some village in Kansas, and you're gay or you're trans or you're just something, or just in any other way, you just don't fit in. When we were kids, you'd go to New York or you'd come to London or to Edinburgh and you'd invent the new romantic scene or whatever. Like you were in the punk scene, which was similar, just a couple of hundred people who didn't fit in, making a new thing. At least now in your bedroom in Kansas with your abusive dad or whatever it might be, you can click on the phone and meet thousands of people over the world the same. That's a good thing. And I think the other one is, which I know it's an issue for Trainspotting the book as well, this sort of flattening of the timeline of culture must have led to the longevity of the book. I saw you saying that the people who come to your events are now shocked how old you are. Yeah, and they're quite young.
Yeah, they think to yourself, who's this fuck is this old cunt standing here? I thought that because it's a youth book, they kind of they associate me with that. And it's quite sort of you can see them, they can see the terrible disappointment etched on their faces, but the interesting thing about it is that I think that the 90s was the last big analog kind of decade, and anything, if you look at the top 100 albums, it's basically it's like the 90s, and then you go into the top albums of 2000, 2010, 2020, and I'm sure 2030, all the same. You maybe
Dark Side of the Moon,
Dark Side of the Moon. You maybe get a Daft Punk or an Eminem or something like that will come in. Chemical Brothers, a few of these things will come in, but it's Pink Floyd, Bob Dylan, the Beatles, the Stones, Genesis, kind of, it's Neil Young, kind of, all this stuff, and it's like. If something becomes big in that analog era, it becomes kind of ossified in the culture. Basically, it's always around.
Which is great for you.
It's great for me because it is. It's great because you are the Jurassic Park kind of sort of mosquito that's preserved in the amber, basically, or at least your book.
You've seen how that film ends up, right?
yeah.
Not necessarily a good thing.
Yeah, but it is. It's like that. It's a great thing, but it's not particularly a great thing for culture because culture should be renewed. It should be out there, and people should be enjoying it and living it, and that's really when you look back at the 90s. Now I see it as like there was a kind of wisdom about the 90s, and it was very tongue in cheek in a lot of ways, and people knew that. A lot of these bands, they're lifting from the Beatles and from David Bowie and from the Small Faces and the Kinks and all this kind of stuff. And it's like, it was almost like it was like a clearinghouse of British culture. It was almost like we're gonna flog this off to the internet now. This is our last stand, you know.
Yeah.
And it was that kind of almost defiant last stand.
That's right, isn't it?
Everything was quite kitschy about it. It was pulled together, and it was a sort of there was a tongue-in-cheek irony because it was like a defiant stand, but it was also a kind of requiem mass for British culture. You know, we're going to the global market now. The show's over. You know, so I think there was an element of that as well.
It was quite sort of camp in that way, wasn't it? And kind of, sort of
Yes.
it was like wearing the badge on the sleeve, going because it was to know all the Kink songs, for instance. You couldn't just click on your phone. You had to have done some fucking work.
Yeah.
You had to have had mates and talked about it a bit. But I mean, Noel in particular wasn't remotely embarrassed when people said you're ripping off the Beatles. He was like, I mean, Liam was a bit more like punchy about it.
But we're all the sum totals of our cultural influences. We're putting it through our own lens, obviously, and all that. But it's it's like I think now that it's like everything is so you can I mean, and I do it myself. You know, we've got the studio down there. We're doing dance music. We're doing sort of opera and all, and we're sampling samples of samples, and we're recycling and recycling and all that. And you think, you're hoping that you have some stamp of creative originality that comes out, but you kind of wonder if that's the case, basically, like,
sort of reusing other bits. And it's the way it decontextualizes it, isn't it? Right?
Yes,
Because so Trainspotting seems hard for our generation to understand it without understanding, the end of big industry on the Clyde and all this kind of stuff, and the end of the welfare state or the contract with the state.
That's the thing. Is now you have the ability to actually know everything. You can go into an AI app and say, tell me about this, and it'll tell you. Then you can go down the pub and kind of be all Billy Big Balls that you know all this. And then somebody will say, all right, can you explain it in terms of, then everybody will start sweating, kind of, and it's like, because it completely decontextualizes it, you can know everything, but it's knowledge rather than experience. There's nothing experiential about it. So you basically become this thing that's geared to taking instruction and passing information on. You stop really being a kind of thinking, evolved human being in a lot of ways, I think. And that's the danger, I think, that we're moving into a post-cultural society now. We're moving into a society whereby we take instruction. I mean, the internet was supposed to be a big library for us, and now it's turned everybody into kind of Nazi incel nonsense, so thank you, Bill Gates, for that, and it's like, we're there it just gives us instruction now, and you saw it with COVID and lockdown, and it's like the QR code culture and all this stuff, and now everybody wants data and information from you, that attention economy, and you think, why are we doing this? This is not kind of good, or it's not even interesting.
I find I become like information obsessed too. I have to stop myself reading news apps. I'll get up and I'm like, for some reason now, it's very important to me to know what the weather's going to be every fucking hour. I mean, it's just bizarre because I can find it out. But anyway, but I just want to make sure we don't miss talking about, we talked about the book, but the documentary that's coming out now called Reality Is Not Enough, which I think is... actually, it's a brilliant title for a writer. Reality is not enough, but also a writer who has loved taking drugs. And no spoiler, I just fucking love you taking DMT live in this documentary. There is a bit. I mean, I know it's not staged, is it? It's just fucking hilarious when I've done it too in a DMT clinic, so I know what it's like. The DMT guy comes on the Zoom and says, "So Irvine, we need to work out how you got in life to this position you are in now." And you're literally, I'm paraphrasing, "Listen, pal, I don't believe in that kind of cult shit. I just want to give me the fucking drugs so I can get on with it."
Gears the drugs.
Gears the drugs. How was the DMT for you? Was it?
Well, it was interesting because I'd done, the DMT I'd done previously had been that kind of standard DMT where you meet the little gnomes and you move into the burning bush.
Right, me too.
And it, which is like the kind of post-life antechamber, before death, the pineal gland opens up and all this stuff. This 5-EMO stuff was different. This was the pre-life. I was taken back to before I was born, basically.
So it's a different chemical.
It was a different kind of. I don't understand the compound of it, but it was like it was a pre-birth thing, and I was taken back to essentially kind of womb or pre-womb, basically. And it was always like because I was lying there in this bed, it was almost like it was I had the cover over me. It felt very warm and womb-like and secure. I had the blindfold on, and you could hear the cameras and the technicians kind of around, and it felt like an operating theatre almost. It
He
felt
kept
like
trying
a
to talk
hospital.
to you during that. I could see that
Yes,
even on
I was
DMT.
going,
That
for
was
fuck's
pissing you
sake.
off.
Yes, it was.
Where
it
are you
was,
now,
yeah,
Irvine?
yeah.
You were like, I just would
There
really
was
like able to shut the fuck
there
up
was
for
a
the last
couple of-
5 minutes.
There was a couple of bits that they took out, which were quite funny, but the thing they took, because they weren't very respectful to the guy who is that, he's a nice guy, he's doing his job, he's doing his bit. You don't want, but it was so the counselling experience was so not what I was looking
Yeah,
for. I
you're
was
not up for
looking,
that, are you?
no, I mean it's like I'm kind of as I was saying, I like my demons. I need them. They do all the work.
They've
Like,
served you well.
Yeah, I'm sitting with them in the irons saying, "Type, you bastards, type." Basically, yeah.
But I found it interesting because I didn't know exactly what you meant, but you said, I think I can remember exactly what you said in the film. You said, you always was an atheist. And now I'm not. Now I believe there's some spiritual level to everything. Did you mean after that specific DMT experience?
Not after that one, but in the general terms of taking the DMT,
Right.
I felt that, I thought that I was quite, I was going to say I was quite devout in my atheism, but you can't really say that, but I was quite convinced of it. And then I thought to myself, well, I can't really be sure because I've gone into this place. It's so fantastical. But yet it's so not overwhelming, or you're just sitting there thinking it feels very commonplace, and it can something that's as crazy as that.
Yeah,
but you're not reacting to it in that kind of mad way, and you're not freaked out by it. You think we have to have done this before. It has to be a fundamental of who we are. So it's we've tapped into another dimension of the self, and I'm thinking there's much more to this shit than I thought. Basically, I just thought about it from, we're born, we get old, we die, the next one comes along, and that same thing happens to them and all that. And I think now the complexity of that is kind of being opened up to me, and I can't, I don't know what it is, and I don't know how to explain it or to balance it or quantify it, but I can't have that certainty, that kind of doctrinaire, ironically, certainty of atheism anymore.
I think it's fundamentally different from something like LSD, isn't it? Which is LSD,
much different.
You're hallucinating based on the reality around you.
Yes.
When I'd done DMT in a clinic, it's like opening a porthole window.
You go to a different place.
You knew it was a different place.
You go to a different place, and it's not like it's not. I mean, as you say, acid is a distortion of everything around you and all that, and maybe your mind is firing out, kind of. It's making little scenarios to fit into this sort of thing, to fit around it. It's filling up the narrative for all these other things, but this is completely, you're in this mad place that you don't actually understand, but you do. You have some kind of really deep reasoning and familiarity of it as well. Yeah.
It's funny what you say about that one took you to a place pre-birth, which obviously it's almost impossible for me to understand what you experienced. But having the blessing, as I do, of having a young child who's now 7, I had this really striking experience with her where she was probably like 2.5, and they say that people who believe this shit say that kids are kind of quite open until 3 or 4 to previous stuff and whatever. So I'm lying on the bed with her one day, I'd say 2.5, and I turn around to her, and her name's Aurora, and I say, Aurora, Mummy and Daddy just love you so, so much. And she just turns to me, looks me straight in the eye, and she goes, I know, of course, that's why I chose you.
Right.
And it was done with
with
anyone
real
could just say that, but it was done with a knowledge and a look in the eyes that made me like, fucking hell.
From a different dimension,
And they say that some woo-woo people say the choosing room and all this stuff. I don't know, that really struck me and sounds similar.
But again, it's like, the evidence with very small kids, they do seem to see things in different dimensions, don't they? When they point something out, they'll show you something, and you go like, that's such and such. It's like that, and they describe it in this way. And you think to yourself, kid, and then you think to yourself, no, it actually is. I
think you have to believe kids. It's easy to think, it's a crazy kid, like a drunk guy.
Yeah.
Well, no, when they say, who's that standing in the corner and there's no one there, you better fucking believe there's someone fucking standing.
for you.
But listen, just before we wind things up, I mean, there's so much more I'd love to talk to you about, but I think anyone who sees the documentary and just, who pays attention to your life is stunned at how many things you've done and how many things you do. I mean, not many people can say they've been a TV repairman. Not a great one. Getting up in a coma with an electric shock.
Yeah.
Very gifted shoplifter.
I always fancied myself as a shoplifter, and I wasn't a bad housebreaker as well.
Really?
Like, I don't want to hide my light under a bushel.
Oh, you should be proud of that. OBE's in the post, my friend.
Very proud.
And then, I mean, when the writing credits are just insane, really, because we talked about the number of novels, but I didn't realise, I started reading how many scripts and film treatments and TV stuff you've been involved in. Then there's the DJing, then there's the music. There's a great album, which I really love. My wife's a DJ and plays it out.
Yes, it was
called
great.
Men in Love, the same as the
Yes.
book. Really brilliant. I'm sure I'm going to miss stuff out, but you just seem so vastly busy. When at an age, granddad, at an age when a lot of men are slowing down, I feel like you're fucking speeding up. You're getting battered less and producing more.
Yeah. I mean, it's amazing when you move into a kind of cleanish living lifestyle. It's amazing how much energy and time you have. It's like that's the thing you realize about getting fucked up is it does require a lot of dedication and discipline. And you have to put the hours in. I'm not really that keen to put the hours in anymore.
Well, that's why so many people, this sort of rock star generation, like Alice Cooper and stuff, they'd give up drugs.
Yeah.
Days to fill it. And what did they do? They take up fucking golf, the stupid fuckers.
What a waste.
What a waste. So last two questions. What are you working on right now? What do you got in the pipeline?
Right now I'm working on a techno opera. Yeah. So
wasn't expecting that answer.
Yeah, I mean I wasn't expecting it either, but it's like we were gonna we did that kind of Men in Love like disco soul album, and I said to Steve, what we're going to do next, and he goes like, we should do a sort of a techno thing, and then we thought, well, let's do a house thing, and then I thought, well, he messed around with a couple of tracks in the studio, and he sent them up to me, and he says it's turned out to be more like a kind of big kind of techno opera with kind of rock elements to it. And I'm thinking, this is fucking great. Let's just go with this and do a kind of techno rock opera, basically.
Well, I don't know if you've seen, just on literally as I was waiting for you to come, I just flicked through the newspaper on my phone, and they said, I think it's a V&A thing. I said, oh, you're a big Bowie fan. They've just found a load of Bowie stuff that he was writing in secret. No one knew. I think it's like a Jacobean drama operetta or something.
Fabulous.
So,
Fabulous. Oh, brilliant. You always thought there'd be some posthumous stuff that he would leave behind at some point, I
skimmed it. It's like he had a locked office full of fucking mad ideas, and it's in the V&A. So you should probably head over there now.
I'll pop over there, definitely.
That's a good note on which to finish. Irvine, it's been an absolute fucking pleasure.
Martin, always a pleasure.
Always a pleasure. A delight. Really good to see you again.
Good to see you.
Take care, man. All right. Good luck with all of it. Cheers.